Facebook. As always, catch us live on YouTube as well. Follow me on all social media outlets. You can follow me on Twitter at The Rockpile Show. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. I want to make sure I give a special shout and thank you to both Lori and Mario Guerreri last week for taking the time to come on with me. Their show ended with a little over 3,300 views on Facebook. So thanks again to both Mario and Lori for taking the time last week. Tonight, we got a special guest tonight. We were talking a little bit before coming on the air here. I'm going to bring her on in just a minute, but I'm going to introduce Vicki Gillen. She is the owner and operator at Bailey's Karate right here in Rome, New York. So without further ado, let's see if we can bring Vicki in. I think I see you. Let's see. There you are. How are you, Vicki?
I'm doing great, Rocky. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for taking some time tonight on Wednesday to come on. It is an interactive show, so I just want to jump in again before we start with Vicki. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, just put it in the comment box on Facebook. You can also put the comments in YouTube, and I'll try to pull as many comments over as I can tonight for Vicki. So Vicki, before we get started, I was telling you before we jumped on here that you've been at this thing a long time. So I want you to just start, if you can. How did you get started with karate? How did Bailey's get started? Why don't you talk about the history first?
Sure. Well, I actually I had wanted to start in junior high, and I went down to the old YMCA. I think maybe it was on Liberty Street, and I walked up to the counter and I said I wanted to start karate. And the lady at the counter said, well, there aren't many girls in class. And then she told me how much money it was. And I thought, geez, I don't make enough money babysitting to do that. So I just went home and forgot about it for a while. And then in high school, I started taking karate. I was dating a guy. He ended up being my first husband. We ended up starting the school together. And he took me to a karate tournament, and I was like, wow, I can fight too. I thought about karate as learning to defend myself and having a little more freedom, hoping maybe my parents would just let me out of the house a little more. But the competitive aspect is really what hooked me. So in 1974, I started karate and I won't say never stopped. After high school, I had a harder time. I moved to Syracuse, and I trained in Syracuse and lived in England for a couple of years until 1980, came back from England and got back into it with my instructor, Mike Bailey, who had actually stopped teaching and had some other black belts teaching the program at that time. Started initially at the YMCA, and in 1980, it just didn't, my first husband, he had been the lead instructor or black belt after Mike Bailey, and there were other instructors. So we sat down, had a conversation with Mr. Bailey and asked him if we could use the name to open a school. And so July of 1980, we opened the school.
And Vicki, you made the interesting point, and I was reading your bio too, and I read some of the story about the YMCA. But one of the interesting things you mentioned was at that time there wasn't as many females involved with karate. Has that changed over the years? Have you seen more females that have been more engaged in signing up for karate?
Yeah, it's definitely changed. In the 70s, it was a male-dominated sport, no doubt. And it was a little harder, much more aggressive. Knuckle push-ups till your knuckles bled in your first class, and they called it weeding out the weak. It was a tough process. So as time has gone on, there are many more women that are training now. And, some people say, oh, it's not as hard as it used to be, but in reality, it's just more accommodating to allow men, women, and children, no matter the age, to train and to become stronger mentally as they become stronger physically, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, we'll talk throughout the program. We'll get into some of the programs that you offer, but I think that's one of the biggest things that I hear. I didn't know as much about karate until I started doing this show, and you learn a little bit more as I talk to different people. But it seems like the mental piece, even for young children, the structure, the discipline, growing up, you watched the Karate Kid, you watched Bruce Lee and all those martial arts, shows on TV, but it's really the mental part of things, really, I think that has impacted a lot of people the most. Would you agree?
I definitely agree. When sometimes you think, oh, I'm not in good shape, and I could never get through a class. So the physical part can be very intimidating. But when you step on the floor and you work gradually and you develop that confidence and that belief in yourself that I can do this and I'm in control, and you gradually become more physically stronger, and the confidence increases the longer you do it.
And one of the things that we've talked to, I'm just making sure we're up live. Yeah, we're up live. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of the small business owners about, it obviously is the COVID impact. We just got word here a little bit ago that some gyms now can officially open again. You got to wear a mask. Some gyms were doing some things outside. How did this COVID affect you in Bailey's?
Well, like a lot of other people, we shut down. It took us about a week to come up with a plan, and we went to virtual classes. So we did classes 4 days a week virtually. The majority, I'd say 90% of our students at that point were working to develop a way, to find a way to learn how to Zoom and just to get on and get their classes in. We continued to work with the schedule so that we could keep them active and let them feel like, they still were a part of the family, the Bailey's Karate family. So we did that until about 6 or 7. We worked with the reopening committee. We designed a plan to be safe and to follow all the guidelines. And we started with a hybrid program, actually before that, we were outdoors for 2 or 3 weeks. I forgot about that. We put grids in the parking lot to designate areas that they could actually train in and keep their space. And then we went indoors with the hybrid 1-on-1.
Now, did you see a lot of clients or customers, I guess, through the virtual process? I know a lot of gyms try to do the virtual piece as well. And, nowadays we're doing this live over the internet. It's a podcast. I want to talk a little bit about the social media piece, because now you got Facebook, you got Twitter, you got LinkedIn, you got all these social media outlets that, 20 years ago, we didn't have any of this.
No.
Now it's completely changed. So talk to us a little bit more about the social media platforms and how that's affected you.
Well, there's pros and cons, because there's a learning curve. You just think you have it figured out. Like you just get Facebook, and then it's, your story, and then it's Instagram, and it's Twitter, and you have your own personal Twitter accounts, you have your business accounts, and all of that is a learning process. But I think the social media has really helped businesses. Those that have a young person on their staff or in their family to help them out, I think that makes it, I know it's made it a whole lot easier for me to maneuver. But once you get it, hopefully you can continue to do well with it until, of course, they change something. But it's definitely been a plus.
And I laugh because my mom and dad, they had the flip phones for years. Mm-hmm. And, we switched over to the touch screen phones, the iPhones. And I always said I would never see the day that my mom and dad would have an iPhone. I thought I would never see the day where my mom and dad had a Facebook account. They have Facebook, they have the iPhones. And, years ago, computer-wise, we had a Commodore 64. Was a computer that we had in the house. Mm-hmm. We didn't have all these video games now that the young kids have, the tablets. But the Zoom thing is interesting because, again, even in the business that I'm in, we do these go-to meetings. We do the Zoom meetings. It's all virtual. But did you see a lot of participation decrease because of people that had trouble with the Zoom type stuff, the virtual?
There were some people that they didn't have good internet. They just didn't like Zoom. They couldn't figure it out. So, we tried to set up private sessions with them as opposed to having the group so that we could work them through it. There were some people that just didn't do it though. They said, you let us know when you're ready to be back, whether it's outdoors or in the school, and we'll be there then. Some people just don't like it.
Yeah, and that Zoom, I mean, my daughter this morning's 4 years old, had a Zoom meeting, this morning, and, you feel sorry for some folks that, maybe they don't have the internet, but one of the biggest things that's tough about the online stuff is trying to keep their attention.
True.
There's nothing better than in person, but, for a lot of the gyms, they put workouts together, for people. So
Mhm.
did you ever think years ago, as far as even like advertisements goes, before you used to put an article in the Daily Sentinel or whatever you can find to put something in. Now, again, with social media, do you find it's helped you out as far as bringing in new clientele or just word of mouth?
Yes, yes. Facebook is great in the sense that you can post something and your friends can share it and their friends can share it. So you
Right.
have that viral effect. And word of mouth advertising is really the best advertising. So I can say something and put it on Facebook, but when a parent does it, then their friends actually believe what they say. So I think it's a great mode of advertising.
Now, your programs over at Bailey's, I know you do all ages. What's the youngest age that you have?
We start them at 4,
Oh, wow, that young.
that young. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you have a lot of the programs. Why don't we start a little bit first, if you can take me through maybe the kids karate piece
Okay.
and what that program's all about.
Sure. The 4 to 6 year old program, we call it the Power Rangers program. And that program is designed to work with younger children to help them, separate from their parents and stand out there by themselves, to learn to be confident, to follow directions, to associate right and left, to learn their name, their address, their phone number. We have safety skills. We have a red, yellow, green abduction prevention program that I designed right after Sarah Wood was
Mm.
abducted and murdered, if I'm not mistaken. So the number one thing that we work to do is to help them to feel good about themselves. And at that age, there are some children that all different attention levels. It's, some people can say, oh, I think he or she has an attention deficit. It's typically not diagnosed that young. Some kids just have better attention than others, and some
Yeah.
are just very, very, very active. And we want them to feel good about what they can do and work to increase that attention span.
One of the things we were talking before we came on, I was going over some stats with you, and a stat that really caught my attention only because, I've been a high school football coach for a little while, been involved in sports my whole life. I have little ones too. And you read all these sad stories about bullying. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the stats was, it said over 70% of the kids actually see it, happening. Um,
Sure.
and do you think that's increased too with karate to help, that parents are putting kids involved more with karate to prevent the bullying piece?
Yes, I think a lot of children are brought to us because the parents just don't know what to do. I mean, when I was growing up, I got beat up all the time. I have scars from being beat up, and you didn't half the time you didn't even go home and tell anybody. You were so embarrassed. But today's a different environment. So the kids do come home and they do tell mom and dad, and they should. So I think a lot of parents just don't know what to do, and that's the reason they bring their children to karate. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's sad because my kids, or myself and my sister, years ago, we would be able to get on our bikes. I used to ride my bike every day to Franklin Field,
Me
to play
too.
baseball all day. I used to play ping pong, all day in the clubhouse. I literally was like, my mom and dad joked, they're like, it was like a full-time job. I would get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I didn't get home till 4 or 5 o'clock, at night. But nowadays, I would never let my kids
No,
get on a bike and go. And
it's
that's
not
sad
safe.
because you don't see kids outside playing basketball. You don't see them throwing a baseball around. You don't see any of that anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's very sad. So, it's a fine line between teaching safety and fear. And it's a constant line that they walk to understand what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, what types of people are safe, red, yellow, green light people, when you need to walk away, when you need to run away, when you need to use your voice. It's scary. It's very scary today.
Vicky, do you ever get a lot of parents that might come in? Like my son plays video games. He plays all this Fortnite stuff. There's a lot of combat games. But do you ever get a lot of parents that come in and there's a difference between fighting to fight somebody and actual self-defense?
Hmm.
Do you ever get parents to talk to you and say, well, my kid wants to fight, there's a difference, right?
There is a difference. And typically we get, what we hear a lot is, I don't want my son or daughter to be the one that starts fights.
Right.
So it's an understanding that we have that they don't misuse their martial arts. And we connect with the parents. And if we find out that they, let's suppose they hit their brother or they get angry and hit mom or dad, then we have a conversation and
Right.
we have an advancement process so that every fourth class they're eligible for a strike. Well, if mom or dad say, the behavior was not correct, that they're starting to use their karate inappropriately, then we will hold that strike. And all students know that if we cannot get it under control, then we won't teach them.
So we got a couple comments here. Paul Noecker says, continued success, Miss Vicky.
Oh, I knew Paul. Paul was a student.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
I know Paul. And then Pat Pasalakos says, sound great. Love learning about a business I don't know anything about.
Oh,
No,
that's
thanks,
sweet.
Pat. That's good. That's awesome. And I know, Vicky, too, you got a lot of teen programs, right, too, for teens and adults?
We do. The teen programs are wonderful. And, a lot of kids are involved in sports. So karate is a great complement. We are year round. We work almost all the muscles in the body, flexibility, coordination, reaction, all those things that, are really good for all sports. But we're going to be there when the sports season is done. And we work really hard to adjust schedules, to find a way to keep them in class, to get makeup classes in so they can continue to train. And that typically works until you get to high school sports. Sometimes it's a little harder. So for the teens, not every teen is an athlete. And a lot of them try to play sports and they sit the bench. And, just to be a part of the team, they sit the bench.
Sure.
And nobody sits the bench at Bailey's Karate School. Everybody is on the floor. And it's amazing that sometimes you would think the athlete would be the better performer. And a lot of times it's that quiet, shy, introverted student that all of a sudden becomes the best martial artist.
I was just going to ask you, I was going to say, are you reading my notes here behind the screen? Because I was just going to ask you, I was a pretty good athlete back in high school and went on to play college football. And one thing I was not was flexible. So we always talk, some of the better athletes, are flexibility. But I was going to ask you, do you find your better athletes are your better students? Or, and you just kind of answered the question, but it's an interesting point because you would expect somebody that's a good athlete, naturally, karate would come, but that's not the case.
No, and here's the really interesting thing. Typically, an athlete learns fast and they become bored fast. They don't always find ways to challenge themselves. So they accept the level that they perform at instead of understanding that they could be the absolute best. And that student that struggles to learn, to remember, to perform. And I was at students, I was a very, very slow learner. That student gets it. It takes so long to get it, but when they get it really well. And they've learned that skill of continuing to work hard to achieve something. And that's very, very, very important. I'm sure you've known a lot of athletes that never really reached their full potential because they never really tried hard enough to work their skill.
Yeah. And, I say it all the time is, again, I've been around sports at all levels, but, as parents, we always think that our kids are going to be the next Michael Jordan or, the next Dan Marino or whoever in football, whatever the sport may be.
True.
But the percentage of those athletes going on and playing Division I, Division II sports, it's a small percentage, but again, the parents think that their kid's going to be that next great athlete. There's a low percentage of athletes that make it to that level. I
agree. And the other thing is they're working some of these young athletes year round with the hopes of that happening. And you're seeing more and more injuries because the body is not intended to work in one sport year round. And the martial arts is so varied. We're doing forms and we're doing kicking and we're doing fighting. We're not just constantly running up and down a field and doing drills that way. So I think you're seeing more and more injuries in younger athletes today, and that's sad.
Yeah, Vicki, that's a good point because they have these indoor sports complexes where my son and daughter both go up at Accelerate.
Yep.
I wish I had something like that when I was a kid. We didn't. But one of the things I always talk about with those types of places is if you're a basketball player, you can focus on basketball all year and just play basketball. Back in the day when I was in school, we had the 3 sport athletes. I was basketball, baseball, and football. I went from sport to sport. Nowadays, I think that, if you have one person, they just focus on that one sport. Going back to your point with injuries, there's more and more of it because of that, I think.
Absolutely.
So I think it's nice when you talk about the different things that you do throughout your programs that prevents injuries.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee. I mean, in anything you do, there's a risk for injury, and we understand those risks, and we work really hard to avoid them. But they happen, but not even as much as it is on the golf course.
Yeah.
Statistically, we have fewer injuries on a golf course.
Now, you were talking about your classes and some of the schedules. Talk to us a little bit about the schedules. If somebody were to sign up with you today or tomorrow, what is it, a 12-week program? Does it depend on what class somebody's signing up for? Talk to us a little bit about the process.
Well, what we do first is we offer 2 free classes. So anybody can come in and try it out, see if they like it, and go from there. Then the second program is our introductory program. And right now that's 6 weeks with a uniform for $99, and they come twice a week. So the introductory, the very 2 free classes, we usually do those on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5:30, but if it doesn't work with their schedule, we'll find a time. And then we'll start the same way in the 6-week program and then transition them into a group class. So we talked about our 4 to 6-year-old program, and then we have a 7 to 12 program, and we have, the older teens that'll go with the adults. But the other thing we didn't talk about is our oldest student is 69 years old.
I had that because for some reason I wrote on my screen 70.
He might, and I don't know, right around there. And I have lots of students in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So,
what's always neat is you hear this, even to this day, like my dad was a high school coach for about 45 years. I think it's about 45. He'd probably get mad at me. He's probably listening tonight. He'll probably type in how many years. But when we go places, you still hear people call my dad Coach. They say, Coach, thanks for, what you did for me over the years. You really, you taught me about life. And those are some of the good stories that you hear. And I'm sure that you've had that impact on some of your students. You just mentioned Paul was one of your students, and here he is still reaching out. But are those some of the feel-good stories you have, even when you're out today? Some of your students still come up to you?
They do, yeah. And that's the part that gets so emotional because, like I have one student, he started when he was 7. I think he's going to be 35 this month, 36.
Wow.
I mean, some of them have been with me forever. And then some, they go off to college, they start their own lives, they have children, they bring their own children in to see me. So we get 2nd and 3rd generations. But yeah, their success stories are wonderful. When you watch them grow up, especially, when they're 4, 5, 6, or 7, and they go off into the service, or they start careers and brain surgeons. I mean, you name it. They've done every career you can imagine, and it's really a great feeling.
I was just going to say that's probably what makes you keep coming back, right? You get those feel good moments.
Yes, absolutely.
So Paul says, sorry about the spelling, but he says Tai Chi. Does she still teach?
Tai Chi, no. We taught Tai Chi for about 13 years, and then we moved the program to Ava Dorfman because yoga became so popular. The Tai Chi just wasn't popular anymore. So he can check with Ava. It's not the Ava Dorfman Center anymore. It's what do they call that new center?
Oh, right on the boulevard, right?
Oh, isn't that? See, you always knew when it was Ava Dorfman. They took her name away.
Yeah, but I know what you're talking about, though. I think it's still over there, but
I still do Tai Chi all the time by myself because it's so good for me.
Wow. So Vicki, talk to us a little bit about, because you have self-defense classes too, right?
Well, self-defense is a part of a regular program.
Okay.
And occasionally we'll offer self-defense programs by request. Sometimes women's self-defense. We've done teens. Back in, geez, when DARE was around in the 90s, I did rape and sexual assault prevention through the DARE program in the junior highs. So we'll, kind of do those types of seminars by request.
Now, one of the questions I got to ask you too is, and I kind of told you last night I was going to throw this out there, but you've been doing this for so long.
Mm-hmm.
How are you gonna know when it's time to hang it up?
Well,
Like, how
my
much longer do
body
you think
tells
you
me.
can go?
I had hip surgery about, I think 12 years ago. My lead leg, kicking leg, like a boxer jabs. I shredded the labrum. So at that point,
Ooh.
the surgeon said to me, if I do the surgery, we have to determine what it is that you actually expect to be able to do. And I said, I expect to be able to get on the floor and demo. And so I had to give up fighting at that point, and any competing. So, that was a rude awakening. And the best thing that it did for me was to allow me to trust in my staff to do the job that I knew they could do. So with that being said, probably the last 6 years, I've been working to not be the one on the floor doing everything. And my staff has done a phenomenal job. My business is better than ever. I mean, I'm always in contact with them. But, I'm going to be 63 this year. So
God bless you.
I have to be responsible, and I have to have a plan. So the school can be around for another 40 years.
Did you ever think when you started this, and I always like to ask this question, and most people give me the same answer, but did you ever think when you got started with Bailey's and when you officially walked into the YMCA and you got involved with karate, did you think you'd still be in it this long?
No, I just wanted to win a tournament. I just wanted to fight and wanted to win a tournament. It just, I studied overseas. We came back, we opened the school. I loved teaching. I mean, it's a wonderful feeling to be able to help others. So, I started the business with my first husband, and then in the 90s, we got divorced in the 90s, and he got out of the business, and I just loved teaching. Didn't want to do anything else. When the base left, I was offered jobs out in DC area to come and work for, martial arts industry businesses. And I said, no, I'm just going to stay in Rome, let my girls go to school here, and keep teaching karate. And here I am.
Did you see a big impact when the base left? Did you see a drop in anything?
70%.
Oh, wow, that much.
Yeah. Yep. 70%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes people didn't know how I was going to, stay afloat, but we put a gym in for about 10 years, the West Side Athletic Club.
Yep.
Used part of the facility, thinking, okay, now I have to pay a staff member to be there, so somebody's always answering the phone, and people will come in, and we had glass so they could see the karate classes.
Yeah,
So
I remember.
they saw the karate classes, and it really helped. And then when we needed the space back, we closed the gym and transferred the memberships.
I worked out there a long time ago at the
Did
gym.
you?
Yep. I worked out for a short time when I was in college, and I came back home.
Okay.
I actually was a member there
Okay.
for a while, and then I came back.
Yeah, you must have known Dan Saltz or, oh gosh, Brian Shalacy or.
I know Brian. Yep.
Yeah, Brian worked for me.
Because I knew Tommy Haddad worked out there, Chris Haddad.
Yep.
So you're probably talking 98, 99, somewhere in that range.
Yes, yes.
But I knew all those guys.
Yeah, I have so many great guys that and some had been students. I think Brian had trained before, and then his daughters both trained. It's just funny, that cycle continues. So the health club really helped to just give us more exposure and help to build the business back up again.
Now, Vicki, you mentioned some of your instructors. Can you talk to us about some of the instructors at Bailey's?
Sure. First, I'll talk about my office manager, Molly Ballard. She's been with me for years, and she's the go-to person for everyone. She trains riders for the Ride for Missing Children. She's just wonderful. She was a collegiate coach. I think she taught field hockey. So she's the first face that most people will see, or the first person they'll speak to on the phone. And then Laura Seeger is my lead instructor. She's been with me for years. She started before she was married. She took maternity leave, had her girls when they were old enough to come back. She came back, and gosh, I think one of them's a teen, right? Preteen. So that's been years. David Lebednik, he works for the Utica hospitals. He's in radiography, and he's been with me since he was 7. He's going to be 30 something. Brennan Beninati, David's a 5th degree black belt. Laura's a 3rd degree black belt. Brandon Beninati is a 4th degree black belt. He's also a world champion. He has world titles in traditional martial arts. Oh. He's a wonderful technician and instructor. Just had a baby, so we'll see how that leads. And I have lots of younger students that are coming up. I had 3 that went off to college. One is Ainsley, and she is doing college and teaching. I lost some really good ones to college this year. And then I have some other students that are getting up towards senior year of high school that are on the floor teaching. We typically hold a staff of about 10 to 12.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you that. That's a lot.
Yeah. I believe in having more. It's been harder with the minimum wage getting higher, but I like to think that we offer the best product out there. And in order to do that, you have to be able to give students the attention that they need. So we have a really good instructor-student ratio. COVID has changed things a little bit.
Sure.
So we can't have 3 or 4 instructors on the floor. But that's always been our goal, to offer a good product, give customers the attention they need.
So Vicki, when you mention the different degrees of black belts that's out there, what's the big difference? What separates like a 3rd degree? You mentioned somebody was a 5th degree, I think you said. Can you talk to us and explain the difference?
Sure. Well, what happens is the first rank that you test to is your black belt. If you're under 16, it's a junior level. You have to be 16 to get a senior black belt. And then it's a year once you get your belt to certify. And then at 2 years, you can go to the next degree or 2nd degree. So from 1st to 2nd, it's 2 years. 2nd to 3rd, it's 2.5 years. And there's more time between the ranks for the higher you get. So someone that's a 5th degree black belt has been training, obviously, for a very long time.
And I was just going to say, how long would it take somebody to even just earn their black belt?
We like to usually about 5 to 6 years.
Oh,
now,
wow.
I mean, it can be done in a shorter period of time, but I think that people need to be really realistic and understand that life goes on and it needs to go on, and it shouldn't be an obsession that takes from the rest of your life.
Now, Vicki, are there competitions, tournaments that some of your students participate in? Where are those tournaments at? And I guess I go back to the old school days when you watched the Karate Kid, the actual fighting tournaments like that. But is it more of a skills tournament, or is there actually combat?
It's a sport karate. So, we call it a game of tag. I mean, there's full contact, obviously, and that's a totally different sport. We used to train and teach that at the school years ago, but we do mostly sport karate, and it's light touch. Black belts have a little more contact. We host one a year in Rome, and of course we lost it this past year, and I don't know about next year. My Herkimer, I have a franchise in Herkimer. Tom Arcuri opened in 1992, Bailey's Karate in Herkimer. Okay,
Tommy, yeah, I know Tom.
You know Tom?
Yeah, I do know Tom.
From Herkimer, used to work for Catholic Charities.
I know the name. I know he was out there, but I didn't know that's when he got started.
Yes. He had already been training and just wasn't successful at running a business. So he would come in and teach self-defense classes for us because he was really good. So he just, he just said, geez, what's it take to open a Bailey school? So basically sold the name and went in and helped them to set up the school and figure out how to run things and set up the pro shop. And he's got a wonderful facility, but he he does a karate tournament once a year, and he does a lot of self-defense within his school. That's his niche. If anybody's good at self-defense, it's Tom. He taught all over the world with Blower Tactical. He taught in Dubai. He traveled. So for people that are really serious about self-defense, law enforcement, Tom is very qualified to do that. So yeah, those two tournaments are the ones that we typically have, and we have another friend that holds one down at Mount Markham area each year. And then
now, one of the sports that's gotten really big over the years is the MMA stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The boxing days of Mike Tyson and, the old days of boxing's kind of going away. And this MMA has just gotten so much bigger. And a lot of the MMA fighters that are the ones that you see that are winning are a lot of your karate jiu-jitsu type, fighters. Yes. They're not the boxing type style. What do you think of the MMA?
Well, I think it's a tough sport. It's anaerobic. It takes a ton of energy. It's very, very challenging. For me, I've done a little of it, just to play around, but I would never at my age do it seriously. It's just too much of a high risk for injury. I think was Matt Hamill, was he from Utica?
Yes, he was.
He came in and we used to do some seminars and bring people in, because the younger people like it. So we don't teach MMA. It's too high risk, too much of a liability. And, we toyed with it a little bit, but for those that are doing it, it's a great activity. It's a lot of fun. It just has to be done. It has to be taught in a safe environment.
Right. My dad actually said he coached Tom at Proctor.
Okay.
My dad was the head coach at Proctor back in he's probably going to date me here, but the 70s. So my dad's known Tom a long time.
Yeah, he's younger than me. So I don't, trying to think. I don't know. But yeah, Tom and I, we get along great. Sometimes we go nose to nose, but we get along great. He's a great guy.
So Vicki, I didn't know, and I told you before we came on that I saw that you were inducted into the Rome Sports Hall of Fame back in 2006. And that hits home for me because, as I told you, both my sister and my dad are in the Sports Hall of Fame. What's that mean to you? There's a lot of history, with the Rome Sports Hall of Fame and the people that are in there. What's it mean to be in there?
It just was an honor. I totally unexpected. One of my students, Peter Fabrizio, had already had a display in there. He had been killed in a bad car accident right out of college. So, it was a great honor to be, recognized as an athlete, coach or sensei, instructor. So yeah, very, very heartwarming.
And I think and I could be wrong about this. Are you the only martial arts? There's not many martial arts people in that Rome Sports Hall of Fame.
I don't know if they inducted Peter. I know there's a display there, and I haven't been there in a while. So I don't know. It's funny because not in high school, back in the 80s, we did one of the first fundraisers for the Rome Sports Hall of Fame.
Oh, nice.
The modern Roman warriors. Remember the gladiators on TV?
Yes.
There was a take on that. So the RCH kids and the Rome Free Academy kids would compete against this team that we made, like a lot of the karate people. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun.
I still have a lot of friends, though, that played over at Rome Catholic, and that was always the big thing. It was RCH, RFA, what football team was going to lose first. And
I know.
It was a fun, back then it was fun. We had those good relationships, and I miss those days.
Yeah, I think we all miss those days. I mean, you grow up and all of a sudden life takes over, and it's not just the joy and the fun of hanging with your friends and playing sports anymore. But it's all good.
Yeah. So Vicki, Bailey's going forward. Is there any future goals for you in Bailey's? Is anything on the horizon?
Our goal right now is to maneuver the new normal, to figure out a way to do it the best we can, and to keep everyone safe. I think everybody thinks that way, and to continue to grow the school. We're down about probably 15-20% because of COVID. which isn't really that bad. So, it's our goal to get back to where we were and to get to a comfortable number. We're not looking for big, big, big numbers where people just come and go and we don't know their names. But, we know where we want to be and what we can handle. And that's our goal, to offer the best product we can offer, to continue to do that and to help to empower men, women, and children, all ages, into the next century.
Yeah. And Vicki, that's one of the things, I got a couple last things here for you, but that's one of the things that I always have learned. And I guess I've learned here more in the past month or so since doing this show. It's really a family. I've talked to gym owners, and the first thing they always say is, the big gyms are your franchise gyms, but those smaller gyms are the family ones that it has more of an impact on you personally. And I've really learned that about karate here recently is, you might not be a big place, but what you have there is important. And just to say that atmosphere, that family atmosphere, that's special. You don't get that a lot of places.
No. And we have a great family.
And I think that's important. The last thing I told you I was going to get to is I wanted to ask you, and I know you said you get emotional sometimes, and I'm with you too. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, but there's been so many people that have impacted me throughout my life. I've talked about family members and coaches that have been a big part of my life. Who are some people that's impacted you, and maybe share a few with us if you can?
Well, first, my instructor, Mike Bailey. He's I still keep in touch with him, and he was just a wonderful instructor and mentor, and taught me really gave me my foundation for the martial arts. And then there's a gentleman, Michael Camphouse, out of Johnstown, New York. Okay. He continued to mentor me and to help me to maneuver all of the difficulties of running a school. And so he's someone who was really, really important. And then, of course, my parents, they just, they were always there.
You think you would have did anything different years ago? Would you have changed anything throughout your journey with Bailey's?
It's so hard. Some people say that I would have been better off closing the school when I went through my divorce, filing bankruptcy, and I would have been a lot further ahead financially. But for me, it wasn't a financial decision. It was, God, I got to make it.
Yep.
So, but no, I don't think we should look back and say, I should have did this. I should have done it that way. I think that we just have to learn from the past and do the best we can going forward.
Well, one thing that you make special on this show, and you gave me goosebumps, is when I started doing this show, I said, I like to talk to people. I love to learn their stories, and everybody goes through ups and downs in the business world. And one of the things that I really can see with you, and really anybody that's been on my show, is I can still see the passion in your eyes when you talk about Bailey's, you talk about your kids, you talk about your students. And that's special because, there's not a lot of businesses or even coaches that can last as long as you have. And you still got more in the tank, I could tell. And
You're right.
That's special. You don't get that from a lot of people in businesses.
Yeah. Yep. We're moving forward every day.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you, for new business owners, for people that are interested in starting a business, what words of advice would you have for some new business owners?
Develop a business plan instead of just winging it, and find someone that's done it already, and ask them to mentor you, ask them to give you a hand.
Well, that's awesome. So I put the website on here, baileyskarate.com. Mm-hmm. Is that the best way for people to learn about Bailey's and to get started?
Sure. They can go right on the website. They can put their name, they can put their name in, and they can register for 2 free classes. Someone will contact them. They can come in the school. We used to say come in the school anytime. We can't say that now.
Right.
With COVID, you really need to have an appointment to come in.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, listen, we're out of time. I got to come down and meet you, though. I really enjoyed talking with you. And
absolutely.
I'm glad you were able to come on and share your story. I appreciate it. And you're welcome anytime. And I'll keep in touch with you for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rocky.
Well, thanks, Vicki. Have a good night. Okay. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
So that was Vicki Gillen, the owner and operator of Bailey's Karate Studios here in Rome. I put the website up. It's baileyskarate.com at 5872 Rome Taberg Road right here in Rome. To see the passion in her face, I told her before coming on, we were talking, and I said that, Vicki, I'm going to ask you at the end because I love to ask all the business owners. I do it on my Saturday morning sports talk show as well. But I love to hear the stories of people that have impacted them throughout their journey. And she shared with us some personal things that I think was special. But you can see the passion in her eyes. You can see the passion in her voice. And that's what a lot of coaches say. You know, my dad's been at it a long time, and he still talks passionate about, you know, some of the players and the impact that he's had on his athletes. And that's special. And you can really see that. And Vicki's got a lot left in the tank, and she's welcome anytime on this show. But I feel like we got the martial arts coming up because next week we're going to talk to Dave Bruce. He's going to join me. And then we'll have Heath Waterman back for a second time. So we'll have more martial arts here the next 2 weeks. Make sure to follow the show. If you haven't been on my YouTube channel, I just got it started about a month ago. Go on to YouTube, subscribe to the page, and catch me live. Anytime I go live, you'll get a notification on YouTube. You can always catch me live here on Facebook as well. Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. But if you know anybody that's interested in coming on this show, just message me on Facebook. Right now, I think my next opening is the last week in October, and then I'll be into November booking for the wintertime. So I appreciate everybody's time tonight. Thank you, Vicki Gillen, for coming on and taking the time to talk about Bailey's Karate. As I always say every week on this show, the Rock Pile is where dreams become reality. I'm out.